Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge Panel, episode 9. And today we're talking about big data sources and how you can use big data to leverage your SEO. I think it's going to be a great session. Certainly, it's a great panel. So if it's not a great session, I'm going to blame them. But let's start by introducing them. Thanks ever so much to the panel for coming on. Rachel, why don't we start with you first and tell us about yourself, where you're coming from, what you do.
Hey, I'm tuning down here from Orlando in my log cabin, as you can see in my background. I've been in the SEO industry for about 10 years now. Kind of done multiple things. Started out doing music the element backlinking, moved on to Disney, and then also tried my luck in the agency life, working with Stone Temple. I'm now proficient. And then after that, falling in love with some of the clients I worked for there. I jumped into working in addiction and behavioral health. So getting into a lot of the YMYL, heavy EAT focused niches. And now I'm testing my luck working at MoneyGeek, doing credit cards and really learning what the true meaning of big data is.
Yeah, it's a big competitive marketplace to be in as well. So
yeah.
And so YML, your money in your life, and authority, expertise, and trust being EAT and YMML. Okay, Laurence, why don't you go?
Well, hi everyone. I'm great. Thank you very much, Dixon. Good to see some friendly faces.
It's been a while.
Yes, indeed. So I'm Laurence O'Toole. I am the CEO of Authoritas. I've been doing SEO since I had dark hair, which was some time ago, probably year.
Yeah, okay. I remember you interviewing me with dark hair. That was.
Thanks very much. Don't rub it in. And I started out, I think, I used to run the digital business of a large Yellow Pages company, and we hired an agency back in the, late 90s and 2000s. And they're now a client of mine, which is nice. And I started then, but quickly started out on my own in sort of 2009, building tools and playing with data, and haven't really looked back. And I love nothing. Most people don't want a spreadsheet of 2 million rows, but I'm quite happy playing with big data. And I know I shouldn't. And really here in such a illustrious company, hopefully to contribute some pearls of wisdom. But if not, learn a lot myself.
That's brilliant. Authoritas is a great tool. I mean, I remember it when it was. For those that don't remember, or do rather, I know you're supposed to not say it at all, really, but it used to be called Authority Labs, but you can't remember. But anyway, anyway, it's now Authority.
Analytics SEO.
Analytics SEO. Sorry.
Yeah, all right, no worries. That's another one of your old customers.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Analytics SEO. Yes. Yeah. And then you bought out link dexes along the way as well.
True. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Will, long time no see, mate. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Tell us about yourself and Seer and everything.
Oh, geez. So I started in search August of 1999. Been at it for a little bit. Somewhere along that road, started Seer. That was 2002. We're somehow still here, still standing. We do SEO, paid social analytics are basically our areas of expertise.
Excellent. Okay, guys, thanks ever so much for coming on. If anybody's listening out there, we're streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Feel free to tell anyone else that, we got Will and Rachel on the call, and you can say Laurence as well if you like, and ping them a link. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. We've also got the luxury of having some production in the background. David, where are you? Do you want to come in and say hello?
I am indeed here. Good day, everyone. So I'm just looking forward to a wonderful conversation. How to use big data to scale SEO. 3 wonderful panelists we've got here. I'll tell everyone a little bit about where else we'll be broadcasting at other times, and also where you can get the podcast just at the end of the show as well.
That's amazing. Okay, so guys, of course, this thing is all sponsored by InLinks and all put together by InLinks. If you haven't tried InLinks, okay, well, that is a data source, a big data source. We've built our own knowledge graph, and oh, give it a try. It's free. Well, it starts free anyway. Obviously, we want your money in the end. So let's get on to the questions and see what people can, what pearls of wisdom we can get out of people. I'm going to start with you, Wil, and then ask everyone really. Well, firstly, I want to say, what does big data mean to you, really? I mean, how do you define big data?
Oh, geez, that's tough. But I think it's when the spreadsheets start to fail to me. It's like when you start realizing that the time that you're spending manipulating data multiple times in a spreadsheet, they just start to fail. And that's when you have to find a new way to manage that much data.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Particularly the pivot tables, they seem to take the effort, really. So, yeah. Anyone else want to stick up a different view of big data, or shall I just dive into some examples?
I just say for me, it's about context more than anything else. It's when you want to just stretch and go beyond, the basic report. So basically, look beyond, I don't know, what keywords your pages are ranking for and how they fluctuated over time to properly understand in your competitive environment. Every key page on your website is not competing with the same set of competitors, for example, for most sites. So it's when you just need to stretch yourself and go beyond what you can do in a basic Excel or a basic Google sheet, and need more data and more analysis or interpretation of that data. You need to slice and dice it in different ways. So for me, it's about context. Going beyond.
I agree with that. And kind of like building off that, we use big data a lot to like find how we could differentiate. So kind of like building off what Laurence just said, using multiple data sources, not just looking at the basic SEO ranking factors, sometimes even like building your own data sources to figure out how you can be competitive in markets that are more about things other than just keywords and backlinks. We had to use that a lot in my previous experience.
I think that's an interesting and an important take on it. Is that oftentimes big data is about blending other data sources, really. So data sources that are out of your grasp, perhaps for the whole data set, but ultimately it's the blending of different APIs and different data sources. And I think it's an excellent definition of big data manipulation and how SEOs use it. And I think for me, I've been quite lucky in that I've been working with, previous life of Majestic and now in Links. Basically, yes, data sources that are too big to fit in a spreadsheet, and then finding ways to have an output for those that people can then use and manipulate. Sort of from server side is probably my approach or my angle on that. So what, for SEO purposes or for any other purposes, what are your favorite big data sources to jump into? So I'll start with Laurence because I know what his favorite data source is going to be. So we might as well get it out.
You're more than welcome. Say Authoritas. I'm not. Obviously, we've been building our tools for years, but yes, we build our own data and we capture our own keyword ranking data at scale. So for me, the biggest source of data is is Google. We are querying Google and other search engines heavily, as is the whole industry, to try and get the insights that they won't give us via API. I mean, if they gave us a nice handy API, I'm sure we'd rather use that instead. But so for me, search engines first and foremost, and then people's websites, second. Obviously we are crawling websites, crawling competitors' websites, trying to get insights. So they are the two data sources. We turn those into a service, of course, but we come third in the queue there.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. Wil, what about you? What's your favorite place to glean data?
For me, as an SEO specifically, it's paid search data. I think one of the things I think SEOs have always struggled with is articulating our value. And one of the best ways to articulate your value, in my opinion, is to be able to say, hey, if I have all of your paid data, I can see how much you've spent for these words, which helps me to make a market price on what you're currently willing to spend for this basket of words. And then I apply that to, large scale scrapes of Google, trying to understand, who's ranking for these different words. But there's something to be said for, I get conversions, right? I mean, monthly search volume to me is just I get conversions inside of my, inside of paid. And then I also get how much you spent, which means I can take that and use that as a, hey, if you're willing to spend this much to get these conversions for this word, then blah, blah, blah on the SEO side. So I just love taking paid data and joining it in as just one of the many data sets I enjoy joining to my SEO data set.
Okay, I'd like to come back with that in a little bit, but Rachel, what would you go with as your favorite data source?
My favorite data source to bring in, that's a tough one, but I really, even though I know
you could have more than one. It's okay,
yeah, because there's for me, especially working at Advanced Recovery System, I got heavy into the local market. So I spent a lot of time using local SEO data to kind of help influence some of our strategies. So going from that front, there's this not so well-known tool called Persuaded.io, built by this guy named Zach Todd. All his data sources, there's a lot from Google Local and then some other searches. He and also the UPS index to find out if some of these actual websites are legit or not. He can find the spam, which keywords have the most volatility, and things like that. So that really helped us scale some of our local SEO efforts, which was new to me and something that you had never really thought of.
Cool. Okay, so I've not heard about Persuaded.io. So let's come back in a little bit on that as well, and maybe you can dive into.
It's very similar to Bright Local. But
okay, we'll dive into that one a little bit now. so Persuaded.io, but is that largely US focused? Because I get the feeling that local results are so much more of a big thing in the US than they are in the UK. And Laurence will know because he's probably tracks them both. But so it's all of the data there US centric? Would you say, Rachel?
I would assume so. Based just how he's building it. It's definitely US based, and I've only used it US based for primarily the really competitive markets in Florida, California, New York.
Okay.
Yeah, so he has a lot of good data.
Laurence, so am I right in saying that the US just is so much more into the local results than the UK? I mean, I see all the SEO gurus talking about local results so much, and yet in the UK I don't see that quite as Amazon can get.
I mean, we're just a small little island, aren't we? What, I don't know, a fraction of the size of Texas or something.
Very much a fraction, yeah.
So I would say anecdotally, what we're seeing from our platform is our US clients. I mean, some of them will have hundreds of different locations they're tracking, or a dozen or more major cities. So for them, hyper local rank tracking, is really important, and it is, it still is important in the UK, but possibly less so. So we see a greater demand in the US, certainly.
So, Will, in those paid tools you were talking about, there's Google's ad planner and those kind of those kind of technologies that you're talking about. I remember it must have been quite a long time back, but all of a sudden I got to an SMX in New York, and Google had decided to take away the ad planner APIs, or the local APIs. Oh, we got William Rock in there. Hello, William. We got they seem to take away all the tools for SEOs and left it for PPC people. And there was a real problem for a while with SEO companies that have been using those ad planning tools in their technologies and stuff. Has that calmed down now, or is that because you're such a big PPC player, then they're not going to take it away from you, or is that something you always worry about? Do Google get angry about that?
Yeah, I get pissed regularly because the way that I manage it is I'm actually literally taking what you spent your money on and got your clicks on. I don't want any estimates because once you actually join the data, so once you take a tool that says here's what the monthly search volume, especially for people that have any kind of long tail, and then you join that to your actual paid conversion data, you realize that the average tool that's telling you a word has no monthly search volume, that for one of our clients, it was 80% of their conversions. 80% of their conversions came from keywords that all the tools out there were saying have no search volume, which means everybody's ignoring them. So for me, I'm literally taking how many clicks did you get on this keyword last month, or this search term in paid? then I'm saying, okay, let me run an analysis on each one of those keywords. So at any given point, we're analyzing, 5-6 million keywords, trying to understand what's happening specifically on the spend. Now what Google's done is, for some crazy reason, they've said, oh, we're not going to show you all the words that you actually paid to get a click on. And, that kind of sucks.
So they're taking away the Google not provided is now extended to paid as well.
Yeah, but it was different with not provided because they were giving you free traffic. They're like, we don't owe you anything.
Yeah.
I literally just found a client that was bidding on the word things, and spent like 20 G's, right? And, when you start taking that information away from marketers and saying, trust the machines, they'll optimize your shit. It's like, I could have paid $1,000 for this mic. I don't want somebody looking at my bank account before they choose how much they're going to charge me for it. And with Google, it's like, hey, if you said you want to come in at this CPA, you came in under. It's like, well, just because I came in under doesn't mean I want to pay 20 grand a year for the word things, dude. So what we're doing is we're pivoting, and we're starting to offset the Google data with the Bing data to help us to better find, because Bing will give you impressions, whereas Google won't give you what search terms you showed up for until they get a click. Bing will show you what search terms you showed up for at the impression level, which means I'm actually getting the data faster, even though it's a smaller data set, because Google was hiding so much of that before. So that's one of the errors we're going.
Can I ask,
go on, Laurence.
Do you use Google Search Console data at all, or is it just too limited for you to actually do anything with the kind of clients you work with?
No. So I think there is value in Google Search Console data. The biggest valuable area that I find, and others' mileage may vary, is the click-through rate. Because I think when you work with big data and you work trying to join data, your whole mentality is, to me at least, is 100% focused on what data set gives me something that no other data set gives me that I can join to my other data. And for me, Search Console gives me that click-through rate by position, which helps me to do all other kinds of interesting things. So that's the thing that I like most out of Search Console, but I don't use it for much just yet.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'll come back into Rachel and Laurence in just a second. But I saw a video very recently. It was kind of a promo for Traject, where you were saying, there's so much traffic coming through for a client that you said, 200,000, 300,000, where I'm only getting one click on a keyword, in a year. But, that's 300,000 clicks of really long tail, really good converting traffic. And that's the stuff that you value. So you're still very much of the feeling that, long tail is where it's at for you in terms of conversions, Will.
Well, you know what? I have the data to say where it is and isn't. That's the freaking beauty of big data, is you stop using your experience as the way that you're going to make recommendation. Instead, like I can go into BigQuery and find out for every client what percentage of their conversions are coming on keywords that had less than 10, less than 20, less than 50. So now I'm not coming out with some blanket, like, hey, everybody, look at your long tail. I'm like, no, bring your data somewhere you can join multiple data sets together, analyze all that data, and then now you can just see what kind of strategies might work for which kind of clients. If anything, I think that's the power of big data, is for so long we had to use our experience. It's like, what have I worked on? 1,000 websites? There's like 1 billion of them. That's a horrible rate for me to go out and say, hey, here's what I think you should do.
I know what I'm doing. I know.
Yeah, I have no freaking clue.
Yeah. Okay. Rachel, you're dealing with data sets all the time. That sort of long tail kind of low volume, high value traffic. Are you finding that harder to analyze these days, or how do you find that end of the spectrum?
It's harder to analyze, but I feel like, especially in the industries I've worked in, like that's like my competitive edge. So like now, especially with credit cards, like a lot of the competitors aren't focusing or putting their effort into focusing on those long tail keywords. And with some of the data sources that we're able to pull in, which we use a lot of, like you said earlier, like a lot of APIs to pull in data sources from government websites, like at Advanced Recovery System, CDC, at MoneyGeek, the Financial Government Bureau site, and pulling in those data sources to kind of see where competitors are missing out on, where our competitive edge can be on. So at least kind of like doing the whole like run walk method, ranking for those longer tail, more intent focused keywords, and then hoping to rank for those like head terms later on.
All right. So building those strategies aren't so using those data sources aren't necessarily in the front end of your product. They're to find out where you've got gaps in your product portfolio and using that to fill the product portfolio, right?
Yeah.
That's
luckily,
kind of
I've always been on the front end, so I have used it to like do my planning. But there have been times, especially at Advanced Recovery System, the strategy was kind of already built by the time I got there, but we had to really redefine that after the dreaded medic update. So that's another time where we had to like kind of go back, look at all our data, and then even do a little crafty ways to bring in our own, I guess, like big data sources from things that weren't really quantitative before, but we made them quantitative in a way.
So I got a question for you guys, and this is maybe me going out a little bit on a limb, but I had a demo today, which where somebody was coming in for the Inlinks product, and the Inlinks product, for those that don't know, most of my audience will, but it's a knowledge graph. So we've taken our own knowledge graph, we've created our own semantic connections between entities and ideas, and everything else is built off of that, really. But we had someone coming in who wanted it because for PPC, and it rings that Wil was sitting there saying that Google now are sort of taking away that keyword granularity that they used to have within the paid search data stuff. And he was saying that he thought that was largely because Google's paid products are going to start moving towards topic-based systems as well, and move away from keyword systems at the front end as well. Do you think that, and I don't know if he's right or I don't know if it's wrong, really. I mean, we're guessing out there, but it does seem to me that this whole entity-based approach to anything that Google does now is starting to become more important. And I'm wondering if it's going to start coming into the to the paid data sources as well, the paid search data sources as well. Any thoughts on that, Wil or Laurence or Rachel?
Well, I'm definitely not the right person to talk about paid. It was about, I don't know, year 2000 when I actually built a paid PPC platform. But it does worry me that it's like an extension of Google's dominant market position. Access to data from a monopoly provider. They need to provide access to data on terms that are fair and reasonable. And I'd say it's essential for website owners to understand demand. To build websites, to launch campaigns. And if you are totally reliant on advertising on Google to actually get the data you need, then, clearly that really just strengthens their position even more. So the specter of them, you can see where they're going, obfuscating keyword data more. We've seen it on the SEO side with trying to get search volume data out and then with a close variance and returning the same search volumes for close variance. It does look like it's heading that way. I mean, Wil might know more or Rachel might know more. They might do more paid campaigns than us, but it's a bleak picture you're painting of them, reinforcing their dominant position and making it harder and harder for us to get the data we need to make decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like Wil's going to have a lot more to say, so I'll make my point quick on this, but I feel like it's heading that direction just with things like kind of like what Laurence said, things that we're just seeing in the SEO industry in general. Like even with Question Hub, everything's entity based. Like you got to get really specific to find a good question, but from the high level, it's all entity based. So I feel like everything's like Google's heading that way. So like, why would they not include paid?
Well, do you want to jump in with some thoughts?
I mean, the sad part is, as long as Google is willing to let people spend $20,000 on the word things, they need to show us every freaking piece of data that they have. When I got matched, like Google's not using entities for paid because it would kill their business. So, if they use it, right? So here's an example. I was bidding on the word exact match GA360, right? Google Analytics 360. If you type in GA360 right now into your browser, you're going to get all their entity work on organic tells them that that's a Google Analytics 360 query, right? So why was I getting clicks for words like Georgia 360 on their variant matches? And I'm paying $20 a click for Georgia 360 It's like, no, you're using your entities to build a better organic search engine, but you won't flip those same entities over on the paid side, because if you did and you stopped showing ads on those, people wouldn't be spending 20 grand a year on words like things. And you know what? Then you're going to just start to remove the data so we can't see it as easily, which, you'll say it's in my best interest with your machine learning. So, I think it's, I couldn't run a business that way. It's a shitty way to run a business, if you ask me.
I'm gonna take a different angle, just because there's no point in us just all agreeing on the whole thing, and I want to bring it a little bit back to organic, I suppose, as well. But there's other ways in which entities are starting to come out in Google's products. So, and a good one, I don't even have an Android, but I know on Androids you've got your phones, you have Google Discover, and so these things are popping up with ideas, and they're all topic based. They're very much based on, here's some interesting pages that about hitchhiking, or about hiking, or swimming, or whatever, because you've already shown some interest in that topic. So when they're flipping around to entities, I agree they shouldn't take away the keyword stuff, but by flipping around into entities, they've got this other avenue of traffic that they can start monetizing by understanding the underlying topics that that people are interested in, and then I guess at some point they're going to say, well, as long as you're thinking in terms of topics and ideas on your advertising campaigns, then you're going to get good traffic coming back, as long as you're matching hiking to hiking.
I think the nasty thing is that they just control both sides of the market, right? So that's the nasty part. Like, oh, trust us, this is in your best interest. And it's like, hey, can I get my data to make sure it's in my best interest? No, we're not going to give you all of it. It's like, well, then who's going to police you? Oh, we will. And it's like, well, I don't know if that's a great idea.
That's a very fair point.
It's even worse in local. Local search is so bad. Kind of like what Will's saying. There's so many things Google can do to make it better, but it's in their money's or their pocket's best interest to just leave it as is, and just leave the independent SEOs to just submit readdressal forms to fight spam or people that are bidding. It's
it's the worst. I don't even want to talk about it anymore, because I get so frustrated. Because it's frustrating.
We'll move on. But William put a point up, and I didn't get a chance to read it out. So William said Google Ads is difficult, especially since they are forcing enhanced bidding and smart campaigns. And smart campaigns are a waste of money for high dollar keywords, and that's the point, isn't it? It's the high dollar ones where you as exact match it as you possibly can in the new Google world, and you don't want Google to learn, because Google's going to just go worse from your exact match campaign there, which is not great, I will admit. Okay, let's get back to the organic stuff. I'm sorry for sending Will off on a little heart attack there, and raising the blood pressure. I apologize for that. So you talked about BigQuery. There's getting these data sources is one thing. Mixing them and matching them and visualizing stuff and putting those different data sources together is a completely different kettle of fish, really. What tools do you use to do that, and what's worked for you in trying to put together different disparate bits of information and matching them up? What do you use? Who's going? Rachel.
I can start. I've gone.
I can go. One tool that, if the data source is small enough, and depending on how many resources you have, I really like Data Studio. It's free. It can be slow and clunky, but if your data source is small enough, you can do a lot with it, at least just to get your point across. But if you have a lot of data, I think somebody mentioned in the comments too, I got lucky enough to work with, have the access to use Microsoft Power BI, which I know there's a ton of other tools that do the same as that, but that was a tool that was super easy and not as expensive as other sources like Tableau. And I'm sure there's cheaper and better ones, but Power BI was easy enough for me not to know what I was really doing to get a lot of data.
Is Power BI, is that Microsoft's one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so Power BI, I guess, is competing with BigQuery, Google's BigQuery. Is that correct? Or no? Okay. What's
No, I would say Google's version. Google bought Looker to compete with Power BI.
Okay.
And because Data Studio wasn't robust enough, like, to Rachel's point, it was, if you're dealing with smaller data sets, it's cool. And they've made a lot of improvements. But, I feel like Data Studio is chat to Slack, right? It's like, it gets you by and it's good enough. But when you want to do the real kind of stuff, that there's a better product out there. But yeah, no. So, usually for most of us, like I know at least for our team now, is we have a ton of data engineers now just constantly dumping this data into BigQuery, making sure it's clean so that people like me can easily connect into it and join data. The other thing I love about Power BI is, if I want to mess around with, Medicare.gov data, I can just go download a CSV and then join it to all of the data that I'm pulling from BigQuery. So like I can do that on my desktop. And I think there's something to be said for empowering your team to be able to have a clean set of data coming in, and then the tools you're using being open enough for you to take data from other places and join them into the main data set that you have.
Yeah, I think that's key. So yeah, and so Supermetrics is out there, but that's kind of spreadsheet based as well. Bigmetrics.io and as well. But these ideas are all really about how to connect those different tools. And then in the middle of all that is stuff like Zapier, which is like the connecting piece, really. I think if I've got a data source, whenever I do have a data source, one of the first things I try and get my dev team to do is to get a Zapier endpoint, so that I can't expect SEOs to really go too far. I mean, unless they're going to take my API and program it and build their own connections. But a Zapier connection just means that loads of other tools can theoretically just pull in whatever we built once. And it may not be the cheapest way of doing it, but I don't have to develop every single time a tool wants some stuff. What about you, Laurence? How do you visualize data?
So similar comments, really. We use Google Data Studio for clients. Find it a bit flaky. Sometimes it would just, you just have to refresh it a couple of times to get a perfectly good data source to show. It's a bit frustrating, but sending data into BigQuery and then visualizing it in Data Studio is a much better way to go. And obviously, once you've sent the data into BigQuery, to Will's point, you can send it anywhere. So Power BI, Tableau, any tool there, you can really sort of visualize this data. And we do for clients. I would probably just mention some different tools. Just that I like I like graphs and looking at graph data, and we use ranking data in graphs to try and give insights on a whole market. So we have our own tools for that, but there's some free tools out there which I play around with from time to time and really find valuable. Things like Kumu.io, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, Kumu.io, and Graph Commons. They're two very similar online free graph tools where you can just upload or connect directly to Google Sheets and spreadsheets of data, and you can then annotate with metadata your nodes and your edges, and you can build a graphs on the fly. And they've got some really nice clustering. And I use it for finding frequently asked questions that are central to a theme. So I look at all my ranking data, I look at all my pages, I pull all my competitor data in, I throw all that in with all the people also ask, and I can go, hang on a second. I can put up a graph, and it's like a power law distribution of questions that are central to a couple of topics that I'm interested in, like, I don't know, keyword ranking APIs or whatever. And that those questions, really, you've got to be answering this website, this piece page has got to be answering those questions. So I think
you've used those tools to pull out some pretty good blog posts as well, case studies in the past. I think.
Well, we did this is going back a few years. We did a graph of a whole market. I did try and graph the whole of the UK with all our ranking data we had, which was a bit foolhardy. And after trying to analyze it for 5 weeks, we gave up. But it was fun. That was a few years ago. So then we focused on my CTO tearing his hair out. But anyway, so I said, come on, we must be able to do it. That remind me later of some crazy harebrained idea I've got about big data one day. But anyway, we'll get to that. We did an analysis for Price Minister, a big French e-commerce site. They were doing okay. They ranked for 900,000 keywords on the first 3 pages of Google. And then what we did was build a graph, but rather than just look at ordinary ranking data in sort of SQL type of way, we took every single ranking page and all their ranking keywords, went out and found all the ranking competitors' pages and all their ranking keywords, and just built out that graph, and then ran a clustering algorithm, just to a community detection algorithm. It was 4.2 million keywords, and we found all the different clusters. And then, I'm afraid, to Wil's point, we had to use search volume. We didn't have any other data, but we could use search volume, and we use Majestic Link data to help them understand in the clusters against their top 100 competitors how dominant they were, so how big the clusters were. So what's the opportunity? And then based on whether they're in the cluster or not, you can say, okay, well, you're ranking okay. Out of all these clusters, which ones have the best potential for you, and where are you dominant? You can end up with a matrix. So you kind of got high potential, high strength, quick wins, high potential, low strength, build authority, reasonable potential, fairly strong, maintenance, and low, don't bother, you'll never get there. So that's a great way of looking at sort of.
I love how you use the word "just" as you went through that development process. It's not as if you did it in a morning, is it? Really, No.
I mean, no. It took a long time, but you can now. I mean, you can. We have a clustering tool, but you can take all that data and you can aggregate and you can cluster that data and you can run these community detection algorithms yourself and draw insights out. And to Wil's point, and what Rachel's mentioned earlier, you can factor in. We were using analytics data and e-commerce transactions, and then you go, well, all these pages have got a 10x potential, but hang on a second, these 50, we make 3 times as much per organic visitor than these. So let's focus on those. And then you've actually, that to me is big data and context. Like I said at the beginning, I've taken, a site that's doing well, and I've looked at, and I found a market of 4.2 million keywords, and I'm not going to do that manually. And I just want to press a button and get some insights. And the real skill, I think, for everyone here, and whether we're using our brains or software or whatever, is using all that big data and distilling the insights into some clear deliverables that can be communicated up and across the organization and acted upon. And that is the art of it. And we certainly haven't mastered it yet, but we're taking baby steps in the right direction, I feel.
There's lots of nods from Wil and Rachel. Anything you want to add on that? So
no, I mean, you're pretty much spot on there.
I think
I agree with everything.
Get it. Finding the needle in the haystack is what we're, That's, you could have just said that, Laurence.
Sorry. One thing I would say, I feel when, and we're guilty of this, and lots of tools out there, much better known than us, SEM, Rush, Ahrefs, everybody, Search Metrics, etc. They've all got visibility tools that analyze you against the competition. And every time I see a graph, it's like I'm an e-commerce brand. I'm competing with Amazon and eBay, and I see that sort of visibility graph and that competition, or Venn diagrams. I really don't like Venn diagrams, right? my pet bugbear. And I go, people aren't doing competitive analysis properly because they're not using big data. And if you're an e-commerce site like DIY.com, I don't know, someone like Lowe's in the States, and you're competing, yes, with your traditional competitors, but you're competing with Amazon and you're competing with eBays of this world. And if you were to ask a question, I got, a 9% growth in organic traffic last year. Is that good or bad? Well, it depends on how the market grows. What happens in the market, and put it in context. And when you compare a graph of your visibility against all of Amazon's keywords, it's irrelevant. You've got so much noise in there that's not relevant to you. If I sell bikes, I want to understand what the gap analysis is and the opportunity analysis against the keywords that Amazon and eBay are ranking for in bikes. And that to me is a really good use of big data to try and give you a better context.
Hey, Laurence, one of the things that we've just started working on, so it's so in its infancy, but going back, I think it was you or maybe it was Dixon that asked about Google Search Console, is so when I was talking about using data for where it has such a unique piece of data that you can't get anywhere else, that click-through rate for Amazon, we're starting to look at when Amazon shows up in what position, do we see that your click-through rate is way different when Amazon's above you, sitting right around you, right? So then all of a sudden you might say to a client, hey, if Amazon's in the 2 positions above you, in almost every product category, it's not worth it because your click-through rate gets crushed. So instead, let's look where Amazon's not in the top in the top. Let's look at the click-through rate as a cluster for that group and say, wow, look, your click-through rate actually is 3x higher when Amazon doesn't show up. And then when you're running your monthly rank checkers, if Amazon comes in, you're like, let's go hands off for a little while. And if Amazon drops out, you might say, hey, let's go in and try to win for a little while. So that's an example of how we're hypothesizing right now on how to use Search Console data to help us to make better decisions. The other part that we are now, it's funny, everything with big data becomes a Pandora's box, doesn't it? So the minute we say, oh, Amazon's ranking, what does that do to our click-through rate? But then it's like, well, now we have to go scrape Amazon to see whether or not it's our page that's showing up. Are we listed? Because then the money's still going into the same bank. So then the client's not really as concerned. So, like it just becomes this Pandora's box, but that's the fucking fun of it. Right? Yeah. Like that's the fun of it.
It's just all in business.
Pandora's box up and being like, oh, and then getting it to your point, Laurence, to the point where you click refresh one time and you've engineered all the data to come in and surface those insights. So that's been that's exactly how I'm trying to use Google Search Console data for something that could give us a little bit of a leg up. I think Rachel was talking about that as well. I think honestly these days, in my opinion, like SEO is like, where can you find that little thing that if you do it, gives you a wedge that's broken between you and your competition? Because everybody's going to have SEMrush, everybody's going to have Ahrefs, everybody's going to have these tools. And the thing is like, how can I use their data joined to other people's data or even their data in a different way that tells a better story or a different story? And that's where I think most SEOs are going to create value these days.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. And William Rock thinks that that's a killer idea. The Amazon.
I'm working on it right now. I just don't have as much time to play with it as I wish I did. But we have a team that's working on that literally right now.
Do you also look at click-through rates? We've got something that does above the fold analysis on ranking data, so you can look at where competitors are bidding on your brand term or brand related terms, and then you can obviously see that impact on your CTR as well. So if you then drop below the fold on mobile or desktop and you go, hang on a second, and someone's bidding here, then that obviously leads you to one set of actions as opposed to actually it's fine, no one's bidding right now. Perhaps I don't need to spend as much bidding on my own brand term.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of that, but that gives me some inspiration to do a little bit more. Because also what you're talking about when you do above and below the fold, what I like about that, and it's funny how this wasn't like my world before. Like, it's crazy that once you decide the spreadsheet's the wrong place to win, how you start learning skills you didn't think you would have to learn, right? So for me, when you do above and below the fold, what I like is you're aggregating that data into two groups instead of position 1, 1.1, 1.5, 1. This, because then when you go to look at the data, it becomes so disparate that you can't really see a trend. So one of the things I've learned, for those of you that are going to start off newer in big data, you start learning real quick. You start slicing that data super small and you're sitting there like, what am I going to do with this? So sometimes rolling that
where
up,
you started, really. You might
sometimes rolling that up into two big groups is like, hey, above and below the fold is a good start because now my 10,000 words are only spread into 2 categories instead of spread across 50 categories of all these 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3s, and it can drive you nuts.
That's great. That's some good thoughts there. So I didn't get an opportunity, and we're nearly at the end, really. But I wanted to just because Inlinks has got its own knowledge graph. The whole idea of in organic Google's moving towards entity-based algorithms and organic search, moving towards an entity approach. How do you think a system like, I know you don't necessarily know anything about Inlinks, guys. I'm not asking you to know about it, but how do you think we can, we as a data source could make our data accessible? If we've got our own knowledge graph, we know how things are related to each other, so we've got it categorized, so we can sit there and say, right, if you want to know about the concept of history, then we know that if you're going to talk about history, you might also want to talk about geography, you might want to talk about these all school subjects, or within the context of economics, you might want to talk about these things like the South Sea bubble or whatever. So you've got different topics related to each other, and being able to throw that back out to people. Do you think we got to make that accessible to people to put into data sets like into Google Sheets or can we can we just give people CSV downloads so they can take that data and move from there? How much effort should a data source that isn't yet commonly available, I suppose, how much energy should they put into making it available to be picked up by anybody else in any other form?
Part of me selfishly, if it's a really crazy data set, just leave it as a CVC file. Don't let that many people know about it. So the people that are crafty can find it and use it to get their competitive edge. But I love, like, if I go to a site, like especially like all the government sites and I see that it's just like a CSV file of data, like I am so happy at that moment, because like, yeah, it's going to take me a little bit more time to like splice in. There's probably better ways to get it, but it's still like, heck yeah, I have something I can work with at least. So I think
Rachel,
it all depends.
do you have access to data engineering in your organization?
Now at this one, yes, it's a smaller team than what I had at Advanced Recovery Systems. We had a bigger team there that, like, I would basically give it to them and they would do a lot more with it in Power BI, and then make it easily updatable for me to go in there, just slice and splice it and just find my little wins when I could.
Yeah, the reason, that's why I was asking, you know, it's like, I find that to not waste my data engineer's time, I'm just like you. I'm like, get me a CSV ASAP. Yeah. Right. And the beauty of one of the things I love about Power BI, and I don't know about other tools because I don't have time to research them all, but one of the sources you can make is a folder. So anything that can email you a CSV every day, you can just basically backdoor it as an API. You just have to dump the file out of your Gmail and drag it into a folder, and you just hit refresh and it updates all your visualizations. So for me, a CSV is usually good enough. And then when the CSV starts to show a lot of value, my data engineers are really good at being like, Will, don't even come to us with this idea until you run it through CSVs 4 or 5 times, shown it to 4 or 5 clients. It all created something that they haven't seen that they see value in. Then maybe we'll engineer the data in a way to bring it right into our BigQuery instance. Because early on, I was just wasting people's time on my team by being like, oh, there's an API, let's attach to it. And then they would. And I'd be like, well, now that it's here, like that data's not what I thought it was going to be. So I just love playing with CSVs until I find the real value, and then I throw it over to the real developers.
Okay, that's really useful for me to know, actually. So Ammon was coming in with some stuff there. Okay, can you bring back the last couple of things, David? So Ammon, what was the thing Ammon said before? He had another one before that. So accessibility is often about lowering the floor, providing a ramp. Helping identify useful opportunity is always in that ballpark, and then goes on to say, so perhaps identifying very easily and very clearly where a lever is, I guess above the fold and below the fold is a really good one. That's a lever, really. And where ambiguity exists can be exploited or fixed. So if you don't know Ammon, find him on. He used to be called Black Knight, but I think this probably doesn't tell anybody that since those days. But that's people that have been in the industry for many, many moons. Guys, we're pretty much near the end of our time. Is there anything massively left unsaid that I really need to bring in here? If not, then David, what are we going to be talking about next time, and when's the next show, and how do people get onto it? Because we've changed our whole system.
Well, we're actually still open in terms of subject, so we're working on the subject at the moment, but I can tell you that the next show is going to be on Monday the 19th of April at 4 p.m. BST, that's 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so make sure that you sign up at theknowledgepanelshow.com to get alerted for that one. We've had a great crowd watching us live on YouTube, especially for this one. Thanks for your interaction, Ammon, William Rock especially. We've got some great likes on Facebook. Izzy Wright, Chris Wright, got Kim Tolfrey as well. So thank you so much for your interaction there as well. Of course, you can listen to the show afterwards in a podcast as well. We'll tell you all about that over there at theknowledgepanelshow.com. Okay,
and the podcast is pretty much anywhere, Spotify, iTunes, those places.
Apple Podcasts, Google, exactly, yeah.
So, guys, before we go, it's time for me to say thank you very much for coming on. I know it's a taking time out of your day is a big thing, but it is really great to have experts like yourselves come in and chat about deep dive onto to something like this, a topic that's there. How do people find out about you? Where do they go to get more information about you? What message do you want to leave people with, Laurence?
Well, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, so hopefully you find me there or via the Authoritas website.
Yeah, but don't spell Laurence O'Toole like that.
Well, I said if Google can have 10 O's, then why can't I? And yeah, just last thought, just on, I think Will sort of touched on it. Just, you never know how far you can go until you really push yourself. It's so easy to play with this data. So, you know, connect a Google Sheet to BigQuery and you know, start playing around with it in Data Studio, and from there you can get more and more advanced. Some of the tools I mentioned, like, you know, Kumu.io and Graph Commons, are so easy to build yourself a graph. And actually, you know, then it helps you understand the potential of tools like Inlinks even more. So just get started, get your feet wet, and you'll probably be swimming before you know it.
Rachel?
Yeah, if you want to follow me for like SEO content, I'm normally on Twitter with that. If you like animals, that's Instagram, which is also linked from my Twitter. And I guess like a little word of advice before leaving off. Just like always keep digging. Like one benefit to SEO is like you don't have the limits of some jobs, so you can take a little time to dig a little deeper in the data. And I feel like when you do, you just find something that you didn't see with all the other standard SEO tools that will either make your content different, better, or even like rank for keywords that you didn't even know it would rank for. So yeah, that would be my tip of advice.
Your Twitter handle's something a little odd. So what was your Twitter handle, Rachel?
I think my Twitter is just like Rachel H_SEO.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Will, how do we find you? What do you want to leave us with?
Just Google me, you'll find me.
Yeah.
blabbing somewhere.
Just use one L, William Rock. Yeah. Use one L in Wil Reynolds.
Or find some other guy. You know, Google will autocorrect it. They're smart. You know, if anything, Dixon, I would just say thank you for bringing us together. You know, I think honestly, like this kind of marketing, search, whatever. I don't think there's a lot of people doing it. It's not the norm. Let's just put it that way. And to be able to sit in a room with Laurence and yourself and Rachel today, it's like, I think for SEOs out there trying to do more of this work, even if you're in paid or analytics, doesn't matter. When you're trying to join this data, it can be a little bit of a lonely place. So my recommendation is, you know, find your little tribe. I'm really glad to hear from those folks today, because I'm like, okay, now I got some other people I can ping and be like, hey, this is something that I'm working on, we didn't get to talk about, and vice versa. So thanks for bringing us together, man. I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Well, it was fantastic for us. So.
Oh, and one thing I would be remiss to not share this. I started messing around in Power BI like 5 years ago to join SEO and PPC data. And I have like a library of how to join all your data on YouTube. I must have like 30 videos on like how to join your SEO and PPC data, then look at competitors, how to join your SEO and PPC data, and then look at people also ask. Like, so it's like, it's a huge library out there of literal step-by-step from the CSV level. So if you don't have BigQuery and you don't have all that, we've got a bunch of content out there people should watch if they're interested.
Amazing. Guys, that's absolutely fantastic. I think, David, I've said everything I need to say. I'll just make sure I haven't missed anything that's really, really important. So it's just, I'll just leave it to say thanks to you, David, for making sure I don't mess everything up again. And I'll see you all next month. And thanks all of you guys. And cheers. Thanks for coming to the Knowledge Panel show.